to The Explainer. We're going to talk about a new theory of reality today, and it's a big one. It's so radical, it actually tries to finish a quest that Albert Einstein himself couldn't complete. Yeah, that Einstein.
So, what was Einstein's biggest unanswered question? I mean, we all think of him as the guy who figured it all out, right? Space, time, gravity. He totally revolutionized our understanding of the universe. But here's the thing, he spent the end of his life kind of troubled because he was convinced that a really core part of physics was just conceptually broken. So, what was it? What did he think was so deeply wrong?
So let's talk about Einstein's unfinished quest. He had these, as the paper calls them, indications of conceptual incompleteness. You see, even with all the incredible success of his own theories, Einstein was just not satisfied. He looked at the foundations of physics and felt like something really crucial was missing. He was really bothered by a couple of things. First, that seeming randomness right at the heart of quantum mechanics. It just didn't sit right with him. And then there were these, fudge factors, things like the cosmological constant, that physicists had to kind of plug into the equations just to make them work. For Einstein, these weren't elegant solutions at all. They felt like patches, like putting duct tape on a beautiful machine. They were clues that the underlying theory, the real theory, was still incomplete.
Okay, so this brings us to the core idea of this new theory, relativizing the environment. It's about taking the next logical step beyond space-time. Look, Einstein taught us a huge lesson, right? That there's no absolute space or time. It's all relative to the observer. So this new framework just asks a really powerful follow-up question. What if the environment itself, the very stage where all of physics happens, is also relative? And this right here is the core postulate. It's a huge idea. It's saying there is no fundamental, pre-existing background, no fixed stage for reality to play out on. Instead, everything we measure, everything we observe, only gets its meaning, its very existence, in relation to a context. And here's the kicker, that context is itself created through interaction. Wild, right?
All right, so that leads to a pretty big question, doesn't it? If there's no fixed background, how does anything exist at all? How does it all get started? Well, the answer this theory proposes is a really fascinating process called the universe's agnostic loop. It's basically a way for reality to build itself up from the ground up, literally from scratch. So what if reality literally makes its own rules as it goes along, with just one single simple rule? Whatever happens, it just has to be consistent in relation to everything else. That's it. From that one tiny seed, the entire universe could grow. Okay, so here's a way to visualize this whole process. It's a loop. You have things interacting, and as they do, they create their own local rules of the game. You can think of this as a boundary condition, or what the theory calls the symboliad. Now, out of all those messy interactions, some stable patterns start to emerge and kind of lock into place. These are what they call symbols 2.0. And then, this is the cool part, that brand new stable pattern becomes the stage, the environment for the next round of interactions. The loop just keeps going. So let's break down this agnostic loop. The cycle is actually beautiful in its simplicity. Step 1, things just interact. No predefined rules, just interaction. Step 2, those interactions enact a boundary. They create a local set of conditions, that symboliad we just talked about. Step 3, within that new boundary, some patterns stabilize. They become robust, repeatable patterns, the symbols 2.0. And finally, step 4, this new, stable structure becomes the new, more complex environment for the next round. And the whole process just repeats, over and over, building complexity on top of complexity. It's like the universe is literally bootstrapping itself into being.
Okay, so if this loop is really the engine of reality, what does that mean for all the physics we thought we knew? I mean, it forces us to completely rethink some of the most fundamental concepts out there, like matter and energy. Let's start with something called the stress-energy tensor. Now, in the old view, the standard physics view, this is basically about stuff, matter and energy, and how that stuff tells space-time how to curve. Simple enough. But in this new view, it's not about stuff at all. It's a measure of stabilization, of the tension within an environment. It's about how much effort is required to hold a specific pattern together. So what's gravity? Well, in this view, gravity is just the effect of structure forming itself. It's not a force from matter, it's the outcome of relational closure. And this even changes how we think about the most famous equation in all of physics, E=mc². We all learned that it's a conversion formula, right? Turning one substance, matter, into another substance, energy. But this new view says, nope, that's not it. Instead, energy isn't a substance at all. It's simply the cost. It's the price you have to pay to reconfigure a stable system, to break a pattern and change the rules. That's what energy is. This is where it gets really brilliant, because it offers a potential solution to one of the biggest mysteries in all of cosmology: dark matter and dark energy. In the old view, these are some kind of mysterious missing substances or energies we have to find to make our equations work. But in this new view, maybe we don't need to find any stuff at all. Maybe dark matter and dark energy are just manifestations of this loop playing out on a massive cosmic scale. They could be the global constraints or the large-scale drifts in stabilization across the whole universe, things we've just been misinterpreting as missing matter.
Now, what's really profound about this whole framework is that it doesn't just live in the world of physics. It actually connects the cosmos and cognition. It builds a bridge to some really deep ideas from philosophy and cognitive science. And what's so fascinating is when you look at the philosophical pillars of this idea, you see that thinkers from totally different fields were kind of circling the same concept. You've got Wittgenstein, the philosopher, who argued that meaning isn't some fixed thing. It just arises from how we use language. You have the amazing architect Buckminster Fuller, who saw the universe as this generative thing, always discovering new, stable structures, not just following a set of fixed laws. And you have John von Neumann, whose math revealed these systems of pure relation. They were all pointing toward the same core idea, that structure and meaning are not given, they are achieved.
So, all of this builds to one final, absolutely stunning concept. It's called the Cognition-Cosmology Equivalence Principle.
Okay, hold on. This does not mean the universe has a mind or that it thinks in the way we do. Let's be really clear about that. What it does mean is something maybe even more profound. It means that the fundamental process, that agnostic loop we've been talking about, the very process that creates a stable thought or a flash of understanding inside your brain, is structurally the exact same process that creates a stable galaxy out in the cosmos. It's the same pattern of self-creation, just running at completely different scales. Mind-blowing. So, is this a completion of Einstein's relational program? Well, think about it. By taking his incredible idea of relativity and pushing it one step further, extending it from just space-time to the entire environment, this framework offers a real path forward, a path toward that unified, conceptually complete picture of reality that Einstein spent the last decades of his life searching for. It kind of replaces a universe of fixed things and rigid laws with one of pure, dynamic, generative relationships. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to chew on, doesn't it? What else in our universe might not be a thing at all, but just a complex pattern that has simply learned how to hold itself together?
You ever wonder how our world, organizes itself? I mean, from the tiniest particles to the biggest crowds, you see this incredible order just emerge from what looks like chaos. But what if it's not chaos at all? What if there's an unseen geometry, a kind of hidden architecture that's guiding the whole thing? Today, we're going to explore that hidden architecture, and we're going to start in a place you might not expect. So, to get our heads around this, let's look at a really surprising example: a huge, dense crowd of people. A recent study actually looked at what happens when you pack hundreds of people into a plaza. You'd think it would just be a total mess, right? Just random pushing and shoving. But that's not what happens. Something else, something kind of incredible, takes over. And here's the thing, there's no leader shouting directions. There's no prearranged plan. The organization that you see just bubbles up on its own, right from the interactions inside the crowd. So that really begs the question, what on earth is coordinating all of this? Well, the researchers found there's a kind of magic number, a critical density. It's about 4 people per square meter. Once you hit that tipping point, the crowd just spontaneously organizes itself. Hundreds of people start moving together in these huge, stable, swirling patterns, almost like a whirlpool of people. And again, no one is telling them to do this. It's almost like a soft, invisible structure forms in the space between everyone, a kind of guiding geometry. This structure, it isn't owned by any one person or even the whole group. It just emerges from their collective presence, and it starts to guide where everyone goes. Now hold on to that idea because it's the key to everything we're talking about. So this guiding structure actually has a name, and it's really at the heart of this new way of looking at reality. It's called the symboliad. So let's dig in and figure out exactly what that means. Okay, what is the symboliad? The best way to think about it is as a field of potential. It's not a physical thing you can touch. It's a relational space, a kind of geometry that emerges whenever things interact. That's what the framework calls structural coupling. And it's not owned, meaning it doesn't belong to the system and it doesn't belong to the environment. It exists in that dynamic space right in between them, shaping what's even possible next. So let's just quickly break down its main characteristics. First, like we said, it's not owned by anything. It's in that shared space. Its geometry is soft. It's flexible, it's dynamic, it's not carved in stone. And this is crucial. It acts as a driver for the system, which leads to this really profound idea. Geometry comes before function. The shape of all the possibilities gets laid out before any specific action or outcome actually happens. You know, this idea of a third realm isn't totally new. Here's a letter from the brilliant physicist Wolfgang Pauli to the psychologist Carl Jung, and he talks about this need for a neutral space that's not just physical and not just mental, but something in between. The Symboliad gives a modern structural language to this exact, really deep concept. Okay, now we're going to take the big leap. We've seen this guiding geometry show up in a crowd of people. But what if? What if this exact same principle could help us understand one of the oldest, deepest mysteries in all of physics, the quantum measurement problem? So here's the question. Could this idea of the Symboliad, this in-between geometry, give us a new way to understand why a quantum system, which exists as a fuzzy cloud of many possibilities, suddenly snaps into one single concrete reality the moment we measure it? This is, of course, the famous and baffling wave function collapse. All right, this framework sees it as a three-step process. First, you've got the quantum system existing as the Symboliad, that same field of potential, which in quantum mechanics we call the wave function. Second, an interaction happens, say with a detector. This interaction creates what's called a basin. A basin is basically a structural constraint. It narrows down the options. And finally, the system settles into one stable outcome inside that basin. That final, definite state is called a symbol. And that act of settling, of resolving, that is the collapse. You see how this changes things? The old classic interpretation kind of made it sound like a conscious person had to look at the particle to make it real. But this framework says, no way. It's not about a mind, it's about a physical interaction. The detector itself, just by its physical structure, creates a basin of constraint that forces that wave of possibilities to resolve into a single stable symbol.
So, the huge takeaway here is that collapse is a physical process, plain and simple. It happens anytime an interaction is stable enough to create a physical record of what happened, when information about the outcome gets encoded somewhere. And you know what? This is exactly what decades of experiments, like the famous quantum eraser, have been telling us all along. It's about structure, not consciousness.
And here's where it gets even more amazing. This mechanism, this whole process, it isn't just for quantum particles. The idea is that this is a universal principle of how things get organized, and it applies across totally different scales of reality. To get this, we need one more idea: plateaus of generativity. Just think of these as different levels of reality. You've got the quantum plateau, the biological plateau, the cognitive plateau. Each level has its own unique rules, its own materials, but the fundamental dynamic, Symboliad, basin, and symbol, it operates on all of them. And this is where it all just clicks into place. Look at this. You can see the exact same pattern playing out everywhere. At the quantum level, the Symboliad is the wave function, the basin is the detector, and the result is a collapse. At the biological level with our crowd, the Symboliad is that dynamic space between people, the basin is the walls of the plaza, and the result is that swirling pattern. And it even works for cognition. A field of potential meanings is the Symboliad. Our senses create the basin, and that moment you recognize something, that's perceptual closure, that's the symbol. It's the same deep structure, the same dance, just expressing itself with different partners. So after all of that, what does this actually mean for how we understand reality itself? Well, the implications are pretty profound. Werner Heisenberg, one of the pioneers of quantum mechanics, he said it perfectly. At the most fundamental level, reality isn't a world of solid things. It's a world of potentialities, of possibilities. And the Symboliad is this framework's name for the soft, guiding geometry of that potential. This all points to a non-dual view of the world, a perspective called software physicalism. It's not a mind over matter situation, and it's not matter over mind either. Instead, it suggests that both mind and matter emerge from the very same underlying process, this dance of soft geometry unfolding in the in-between space of the Symboliad. They aren't two different things fighting for control. They're two expressions of one single dynamic.
Okay, so let's just recap the big ideas. Reality is shaped by this soft, not-owned geometry called the symbioid. What we call collapse is actually a universal process of stabilization happening inside a structural basin. And this isn't just for quantum physics. It happens at all scales, from particles to people. And maybe most importantly, this means the observer and the observed are locked in this deep process of mutual co-creation. Which leaves us with one last massive question to chew on. If reality is constantly being co-created in this in-between space, if we're not just passive spectators but active participants whose very structure helps create the basins that shape the world, then what does it truly mean to be an observer?
The observer, as defined as the resonant instance in the foundational thesis, life, the observer, and consciousness, one and the items through the structural coupling emerged between it, and the environment offers a framework of a new ontological category as software physicalism.